On today's Locked On Jayhawks takeaways and recap of Kansas getting by kind of in a sleepy one, 71-59 against Colorado.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. Thank you to the everydayers catching each and every episode. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. We're going to be recapping Kansas, Colorado on today's edition of the show. Takeaways from the game for KU. We'll get into game awards and what is next for the Jayhawks on this episode. They are brought to you here by FanDuel Sportsbook. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. And if you would have bet KU, you would not have covered the spread, but maybe you've been down on KU and you went the other way with it, in which case you would have came out on top. So 71-59 is the final score here, and kind of a sleepy game. Kansas was pretty impressive in the first half, and kind of hard to diagnose how much of that was Kansas, playing well and how much that was Colorado just being a bad basketball team this year. But you got up 40-26, and if you would have been able to, keep doing that, I think you would have felt a little bit better with where the final score was. Instead, Colorado outscores you 33-31. They have the strong second half, especially early in the half, where it kind of gets to a point where you have to make some plays at the end of the game to close this one out. And I don't know, it's one of those weird things where it's like, don't apologize for winning ever. And if you have to win in an ugly way, or if you have to win a close game, just be happy you won the game. Now, I always say, if you continue to have to win in close fashion, in a fashion where, you are playing games closer than you expect to be, eventually you start to stack those together and be like, yeah, something's up with this team. And in a weird way, beating Colorado by 12 in a game where you didn't add a ton of excitement and you let them back into the game against a team who, at this point in time now, is 0-13 in Big 12 play. In a weird way, playing a close game with Colorado almost feels like you lost a game to a better team. It's not. You take the win. Again, don't apologize for it. But I don't know that it makes anybody feel any better about where the team is at right now, or about how they would respond to the Kansas State loss, about how they would respond to Bill Self, talking about the lack of consistent energy, about Bill Self talking about changing up the practice schedule, and I don't know, the way that they would approach practice and the need for more energy. I don't know that anyone really feels like, oh, okay, this was a definitive moment of that change, of some of the things that Bill Self is maybe calling them out for, some of the questions you have about this team, that all of a sudden now you just feel like, oh yeah, see, they overcame that and now they're a better team for it, and they moved on. So I guess that is what it is. But again, you'd still rather win the game. You'd rather win the game by 12. This team has lost enough games at this point in time that you don't need to lose a game like this to teach a lesson. If the previous 7 losses didn't teach a lesson, then I don't know what will. And maybe we're kind of at that point in the season. So I do think it is interesting if we diagnose what happened here in this game to, what went well for KU versus what did not go well. I think there's some interesting things. So what went well for KU in this game? The 2-point shooting was good. You shoot 47% from the floor, which was aided by your 2-point shooting because you didn't shoot well from 3-point range. In the end, Kansas goes 21 of 37 on 2-point shots against Colorado, which is good for about a 57% clip. So, Kansas shot good on those 2-point shots and on the interior. The passing was excellent for Kansas in this game. You wind up in a game with just 8 turnovers, so you did a good job, holding on to the ball and not throwing the ball away a ton. And you counter that with 18 assists. So 18 assists on 27 made shots, which I think speaks to a couple things for KU. One, they do have good ball movement. They have a lot of players who are good passers. Also kind of speaks a little bit to the fact that they don't have a lot of guys who can, just create buckets for themselves. But that's neither here nor there. Those are the positives here. And you had a good passing game. I mean, you'll gladly take an 18 assist to 8 turnover game any day of the week, right? Can we say defense? I mean, you held Colorado to 59 points, 39% from the floor. I guess both of those are areas their leading scorer in Hammond had just 2 points in this game on 1 for 7. So can you say that the defense, I don't know, because Colorado was 4 of 23 from 3. I don't feel like they played very well. I just feel like they're not a very good team. You still only got 8 turnovers off of them. I don't know if this was like a great defensive game as much as the stats might indicate necessarily. I don't think it was a bad defensive game, but like I think it was just a average defensive game for you, that you were just playing a team that wasn't very good. But I don't know. I guess you could say the defense if you're just looking at the stats. The other good news is that I feel like Flory Bidunga was back. Feels like maybe he was in a bit of a freshman wall for a couple games. And, in a game where he plays 18 minutes, he only has 4 points, but he had 6 rebounds. His presence was felt. He has a couple of big blocks in there. I thought Flory looked more like the guy we were accustomed to in this game. That would be big if, he's past that freshman wall and back to the guy that you're kind of used to seeing. And then the other one is, it's always good whenever some of the role players have solid games for you, and you can start to wonder, okay, is this a turning point where they're about to get hot, or they're about to make this who they are moving forward? And David Coit having 8 points, 2 of 3 from 3 in 17 minutes. He was plus 10 on the box score, plus minus, which was third on the team. Hunter at plus 13, KJ at plus 12 were the only ones better. So those were all good signs, I think, for KU. Now, what didn't go well for KU in this game, going back to the defense thing, they're still not forcing turnovers. I had that whole spiel after the Kansas State game that basically Kansas over these last, 7 games outside of the Baylor game, it's really 6 of the last 7, was like the worst turnover defense team in the country. They're just not forcing steals or turning teams over. They're not applying enough ball pressure. They're not making teams uncomfortable enough. And that didn't change in this game. Colorado came into this game 354th in the country in turnover rate offense. In Big 12 only games, they came in 16th. They came in turning the ball over about a quarter of their possessions. In Big 12 games, 23.3% of the time. In this game, they only had 8 turnovers. That is a very bad sign that this is not going to change for KU. And forcing turnovers is not just an energy stat, right? It comes down to having good defenders and having players with quick hands and having alert defense. There's a lot of different ways you can force turnovers, but energy is a big part of it. Energy and physicality are big parts of it. And I don't think I would describe Kansas as an energetic team or a physical team. And I think you're seeing that kind of continue. Another not good thing is you continue to see the transfer wings and Rylan, Griffin, and AJ Storr struggle. If you're Kansas, Storr only played 8 minutes in this game, and Rylan Griffin, played 16 minutes, didn't play for a big chunk of that second half. I don't know what it is. Ever since Rylan Griffin has been reinserted into the starting lineup, he can't make 3. Like, he just can't make a shot. I thought this would be the game for him based on what Colorado gave up. And I think now over these last 3 games that he started, he's like 1 for 15 from 3-point range. It's somewhere around there. I just don't understand it. He's getting some good looks too. So I don't know if that's a mental thing or what, but yeah, I don't know really where you go with this, to be completely honest. Lack of consistent energy again, like that was not a great thing. You would think after a game you got called out, you would have consistent energy. They showed some energy in the first half. There was a bit of a lull in the middle of it, but then you come out with no energy to start the second half, and it was just kind of more of the same and kind of more of the idea that, yeah, this team isn't changing. This team is who they are. And the good news on certain nights like this night is that you are a better team than Colorado, and you are a better team than some of these schools that you can play. That, yeah, you should be an NCAA tournament team and a team who's going to win 20 games and this sort of thing. But like, that comes back to haunt you against some of these better teams and bigger games. So, yeah, that wasn't great that you didn't see any change there. And then I think all that kind of led to one thing, which was, you come into this game, especially after you get up 14 and a half, and it's like, okay, can you win this game by 20? Can you win this game going away where you feel like, yeah, you took care of business against a worse team and you did just that, but instead you just kind of let them hang around, and it's more of the same of like, okay, they won the game, but how good are they? Because you're not hammering a team. I mean, this is a team who was 0-12 in Big 12 play. And, they had lost, 3 straight games by double digits. And I forget the number I said on the pregame show. It's all but like 4 of their Big 12 games. So that would be 8. So 9 of Colorado's 13 Big 12 games, they've lost by double figures, I believe, if I'm counting this right. So like, in a way, you definitely did kind of want to hammer them. So I guess bottom line here, you take the win. Like I said, you'll gladly take a double-digit win any way you can get it. But I don't know about you. I don't feel any better about this team moving forward, if we're talking long-term takeaways. I also don't feel worse either. I just kind of feel the same after this game. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that can be a good thing that's just like, okay, move forward. You take the win, be happy with the dub. Schedule opens up a little bit here. And if you can build some of these wins together, then who's going to really care how you looked in this game? At the same point in time, if we're trying to overreact to what happens in a 1-game sample, which is pretty much what we're doing when we recap individual games, Again, I don't think you really feel better. But again, I guess you don't really feel worse either, which is, I guess, sort of a good thing. So fine way to start the opening to the schedule, I suppose, for KU. All right, let's get to the game trophies next. And what's next for KU? This is Locked on Jayhawks. Our episode of the show is brought to you by Wayfair. After the holiday hustle, there's nothing like giving your home a little TLC. I always find the decluttering and refreshing my space gives me or helps get me back into a routine. Whether you're tidying up, clearing out, or just want to give your space a new look to start the year, Wayfair is everything you need, all within your budget. My favorite part, the free and hassle-free delivery, even for the larger items. Wayfair's site was so easy to navigate, and I found everything I needed in no time. Give your home the refresh it needs with Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That is wayfair.com, Wayfair, wayfair.com. Every style, every home with Wayfair. Continuing on this episode of Locked on Jayhawks, thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to make Locked on College Basketball your second listen every day. All right, game trophies for the Jayhawks, winning by 12 over Colorado. Best moment of the game, I think in the first half there were a lot of cool moments of big-to-big passing, whether it was KJ to Hunter or the pass from KJ to Flory where he dunked something. I mean, Flory had some really cool highlight moments in this game. But the big passing was really good in the first half for KU, and I think that led to some cool moments. A lot of the Flory, well, there were 2 Flory blocks, but like those were cool highlight plays. Just Flory blocking. Just every time Flory jumps high in the air, it seems like something cool happens. I guess maybe the best moment of the game is the one that to me felt like it sealed it. Like you were letting them hang around. It's 64-56. You miss a shot. I think it was Rylan Griffin misses a 3. KJ Adams, who thought had a good game for KU, tips the ball out on the rebound. It goes straight to Zeke Mayo, who's wide open for 3, and shoots it and knocks it down. This is not a particularly great game for Zeke Mayo shooting the basketball. I thought KJ had a really good game, as I just said. KJ should get credit there. I don't know if he did for a rebound and an assist. He ended up with 5 rebounds. They had 5 assists, so maybe he did. But I thought that was a cool moment, and KJ played a good game, so maybe indicative of that. Worst moment of the game. Honestly, you could probably say the whole second half. It just felt very lethargic and lack of energy, and I don't know. It just, in a weird way, it feels like that's what's around this program right now, whether it's the players, whether it's, right, there's a lot going on online about the student section and only having 24 camping groups. I guess there was a camping issue with an inability from facilities to get in and stuff. And I don't want to point fingers about, who's wrong and what's wrong and this or that, but it just feels like I was looking at tickets before the game and you could get it was literally row 1. It was not on the bench side of the court, but it was row 1 on the around the mid-court line. I would say it was going for $160, which you would never see in a Big 12 game. It just feels like there's a lack of energy around the program, in the program, around the program, and I think that second half was a good summation of that, especially the start to the second half where Kansas comes out without a lack of energy because they continue to not be able to string together 2 full halves of energy. I don't know why. The Passmore quick hook was not a good moment in the game because that was weird. It was Raquise Passmore's coming in. We haven't always seen him all the time. And I'm not here to be this is the wrong lineup. They should be playing Raquise Passmore this many minutes. I don't know. Raquise Passmore hasn't really had that moment this year where you're you have to play this guy more. But also for him to come in for a minute and shoot a 3 and then just get pulled right away for just being okay, I don't think that was the worst shot in the world. That was certainly not great, and I don't know, maybe it's just a sign of times, and I also think it's a sign of the lack of leash that is given to some of these players, but also at the same point in time, it's one of those things where it's well, you look at Rylan Griffin struggling, and you look at Raquise Passmore when he has played this year, the numbers aren't great this year, and it's okay, it's a two-way street. It's one of those things where it's yeah, could these players be getting a longer leash? Sure. But also when they're getting an opportunity, none of them are really taking advantage of it, where it's part of you is also I don't really blame the coach. If you were in the shoes of the coach and you had players continue to not perform for you when you're out there, even if it was more limited time, of course you're going to have a bias to not playing them as much. So it's it's one of those things where it's I can understand both sides of it, and both sides of it it's not fun. And then, the other worst moment, Rylan Griffin just can't make a shot. He's this elite 3-point shooter, but he's just gone ice cold these last 3 games. Maybe he's saving all the shots for when Kansas really needs it at some point in time here. I don't know. Maybe he's going to go on a Malik Newman March run. That'd be pretty sick if Rylan Griffin did that and he just all of a sudden is shooting 50% from 3 in March or something like that. The appalling stat of the game for KU. This is going to be an interesting one. I mean, I go back to those turnover numbers, right? Because the fact that you're only forcing 8 turnovers, that is, like I said, like that is very bad for KU. Again, like this is one of the worst turnover teams in the country in Colorado. And I don't know what the turnover percentage is yet, but their lowest turnover percentage in a game was 14.1%. So I'm going to be interested to see what that ends up being for Colorado, because if it is the lowest, I don't know that it would surprise me necessarily based on how this game went. But yeah, that was a little bit rough for KU not being able to force turnovers. Something that we kind of talked about in the Kansas State game. So that would be a good appalling stat. The other appalling stat would be the Rancich guy, or however you pronounce it, number 7 for Colorado. 19 points, 9 rebounds. He came in averaging 5 and 2. How do you let that happen if you're Kansas? I mean, they did a good job on like the key players. Is that just crap luck like against KU? Or is that just bad defense on certain guys? I don't know. That would be a good appalling stat for Kansas as well. Offensive MVP for the Jayhawks and the home team. I mean, Hunter Dickinson had 19 points, led you by 4 in points, 8 for 11 from the floor. He had 9 rebounds, 2 on the offensive glass. Did have 3 turnovers, but I mean, 19 points in 28 minutes of action. I think he has to be the winner there, especially because you look at some of the other guys who had double-figure scores, like Dajuan was only 4 of 11, Zeke was only 4 of 12. KJ had a good game all around, but you know, I don't necessarily think of like KJ as being this driver of the offensive end of the ball. You could make probably an argument for David Coit. The 8 points he pitched in off the bench in 17 minutes was pretty crucial for KU. That one step back mid-range he had was a really nice shot. But yeah, I think it's kind of hands down. Hunter Dickinson is your offensive MVP in this one. Okay, defensive MVP for KU. You could argue Flory. He had those two cool blocks for KU. But to me, this one is KJ Adams pretty handedly. He ended up leading the team with 3 steals. So in a game where you didn't, force a ton of turnovers, you did get 3 of them from KJ. He also had a block, and the block was a really cool sequence for him where he gets a block on one possession where it was like a highlight block additionally to that. And then the next possession down the court for Colorado, he forces a jump ball, which I don't know if that counts as a steal or not, but it forced the jump ball and gave possession to KU. And the jump ball one, honestly, might be more impressive than the block to me. Like, the block is a cooler highlight. It's a cooler play. But the jump ball, if you go back and rewatch it, that was not his guy. I'm pretty sure it was Hunter Dickinson's guy who was, like, driving on him. And he comes in from the help defense. And that's something we hear from Bill Self all the time. I almost wish that, like, Bill Self would find a way to, like, show film or something on social media to be like, because we hear it, but you don't always see it. And this includes me. Like, I'm far from an X's and O's, expert in basketball or anything, but like, there's certain times where you do notice he is making up for other players on the defensive end, or he is helping other players on the defensive end. And that was one of those moments where it's like, you can see his impact on the defensive end by helping other players, by covering up for them in certain ways that sometimes you do notice, sometimes you don't notice, sometimes you just think he's rotating or something, but he's actually, knows where the play is going to go, and somebody made a mistake or something. But I thought KJ was really good on the defensive end for KU overall for this one. What's next for the Jayhawks? We'll talk about that on the other side with Locked On Jayhawks. We will be back on Thursday's episode. Can the Jayhawks win a title? We're going to compare Kansas to past March Madness champions in terms of how they stack up in some different like statistic filters. So stick around for that one coming up on Thursday. Friday, we'll have a Kansas-Utah preview. And that brings us to our next segment. What is next for the Jayhawks? Well, it is the Utah Utes, and they're going to be on the road, which will certainly be interesting because so far in the Hunter Dickinson era, as I've kind of coined it here, Kansas has not been a very good road team. It seems like they were maybe shaking some stuff off early in Big 12 play. They won at UCF in a blowout. They won at Cincinnati. But since that point, they just have the TCU win on the road. They lost by double figures at Iowa State. They lost by double figures at Baylor in that bad second half. And they lost by nearly double figures to Kansas State. So they've lost 3 of their last 4 on the road. Can they get back to it? Because, I mean, it's really the next 2 on the road for KU, right? They're at Utah and they're at BYU. Certainly the Utah game looks more winnable on paper. I mean, it should be. I think BYU a little tougher place to play, but also BYU is just a better team, right? and BYU shoots a lot of threes. But the Utah matchup is going to be super interesting. And I think it'll be interesting what KU decides to do with this travel over these next 2 games, because, you're in altitude and the recovery off altitude can be difficult. But what I also find interesting, going back to the idea that Kansas has not always been an energetic team to start games, Kansas has not really been a team that strings together high-level energy play for long periods of time over games for both halves of games. How does that get impacted by the altitude, right? Do they have even less energy than normal? And if so, that's a scary place to be, where Kansas could drop both these games. So you're kind of in a position where, like, you need to win both of these games, right? You want to get a top 4 seed in the Big 12, where you get a bye in the first round of the tournament, and you're not playing on Wednesday back-to-back years, which would be kind of embarrassing from where things were before. You kind of got to win both these games on the road. But I don't know. There's a part of me that's just thinking, like, yeah, probably going to go 1-1 in these 2 games. So we'll see. Like I said, if you win those next 2 games, you're going to look back on this Colorado game. It's just like, okay, wasn't their best game, but it started this win streak at this point in time. But, if they lose at Utah, not great Utah team on the road, you're going to look back at Colorado and be like, yeah, this team, they just don't have it. So it'll be very interesting, fork in the road that this team goes from here. That'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page. And we'll see you next time with LOJ.